right. Welcome everybody to Seven Best Negotiating Tips. We have Jack Tumminello here with us today. Jack has been a partner to our volunteers and for our clients with us for many years, and we're very thankful for him to share what his skills are. But we'll go into that in a second. I just want to introduce you to Boston Business Mentors, just in case you are new today. So our goal is education and assistance to small businesses, whether you're in the beginning phases and the planning phases to the growing phase to even exiting your business. We work with everyone. Our mentors are volunteers. They have a wide variety of volunteers that have different skills. They have different experiences. They've learned from those experiences, whether they were positive or even negative. They've learned from them, and they can share what they've gained with you. A mentor can be someone you learn from. It can be someone that's a sounding board for you. It can be someone that helps you organize and plan to reach your goal. So if you don't have a mentor, it really is a great experience. And there, of course, is no fee because our mentors are volunteers. They just want to give back to the small business community and help the local economy. So consider reaching out. You can use that QR code there. So we do have an educational component as well, as I mentioned. That would be through our workshops and in-person events. We have several coming up. We have some in-person events we're going to be at. Those will be posting soon. Our workshops, I'm every week I'm adding a new topic, and we've added a lot of really great new topics. Some with presenters that have been with us for a while and some with new presenters. So take a look at the website, watch for the newsletter. On our website, you can find information or resources. You can find recordings of past presentations. You can find blogs. There's some really great blogs. So take a look at that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pull down my share, and I'll let Jack put up his screen. And while he does that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Jack is a lifelong entrepreneur, and he does believe that negotiation is an essential business skill. That's why he's doing this to help you. Today's presentation is based on his experience and what he's learned from launching multiple businesses. He's negotiated deals with investors and forged relationships with large companies like Disney and Motorola and other companies. So, has a broad range of experience to draw on. So we just want to thank Jack for his assistance today and being a Boston Business Mentor Partner. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jack.
Thank you. So, how do I,
Your
can,
share's not quite there yet. Yeah.
oops,
It's
I think I messed up on you.
no problem.
Hmm. Do I share here now?
Yes, you can share now.
Um, Trying to find the share button.
It should be on that bottom Zoom bar.
No, it's usually right in the middle here.
Yeah, it usually is. Hmm.
Um, and I don't know why it's not. It really isn't.
Can you see me?
I can see you, but I don't know what happened to the.
Is it underneath the transcribe? Did you just get a pop-up for transcribing the presentation? Maybe hit OK on that if maybe it's covering up your Zoom bar.
I really don't know where it is. I see chat, three items on chat. Um,
Is there a more button with three dots?
oh, here
Maybe?
it is. Here it is.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Excellent.
Now, are we back
There.
now?
Yes, we are
Okay.
there. So you just run your
So let
slideshow.
me kind of get to the slideshow and we will be all set.
Excellent.
How's that?
Beautiful.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hey, welcome everyone. Good to you see me. I hope everybody is well and staying warm. I think most of you are in the Boston area, so you know that it's really kind of cold out here. Um, Let me talk to you about what I'm going to talk about today. And this is the course that I put together probably 7 or 8 years ago. And it really, I always knew that everybody negotiates. You negotiate since you were a child. As a baby, you would cry and you would get fed or you go to sleep. So you were really negotiating even as an infant. But we always negotiate. And so I'm not trying to teach you how to absolutely negotiate. What I'm trying to do is really just try and help you make better deals. And while I've dealt with small businesses and large businesses, it doesn't matter. These principles or these tips really apply all across the board. Doesn't matter whether you're a small company, an individual consultant, or in a large corporation. They all apply. And let me explain a little bit more about that. So the way I did this is, I'm retired. I have had a lot of years in business. Set up my own company, work for big companies. I've run the gamut of all of those things. Um, so what I did was, my wife said to me, "When what are you going to do now in retirement?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And she said, "Why don't you teach?" Because that's where I started from, and that was my background, professional development. And so I said, "Well, what am I going to teach?" She said, "Well, you love to negotiate with the car dealers." She said, "Why don't you teach negotiation? You've got all the experience." So I went back and I took my experience, and then I read a whole bunch of books on negotiation and negotiation theory and the current principles and everything else on negotiation. And I mirrored what I read to my experiences. And that's where I came away with, I think, are 7 tips that if you can take these 7 tips, you're going to find that they're really timeless. It doesn't matter. And they're universal. They apply to everything. And frankly, they continue to work for me, so they will work for you if you just apply them. In this course and in this webinar, I'll also cover some other business tips that just kind of naturally flow out of the conversation. So hopefully you'll appreciate them and find some value in that. Here's the best part, though. The best part is that if you learn these tips now, and I took a lifetime getting to them, and they didn't all come at one time. But if you learn them once, you'll be able to use them all through your life. It's great. And they all have value. So you're going to actually end up, if you do what I'm suggesting, you'll end up having a lot more value out of what I'm going to tell you than I appreciated and got. I need to make sure that we're all on the same page when we talk about negotiations. So let me start with a little bit of a primer, and then we'll get into the 7 tips themselves. So negotiate simply means to communicate in search of mutual agreement. You're trying to come to an agreement with somebody else, or maybe even 2 parties, and trying to find it in a way that you're mutually satisfied. Um, and and that's what this is all about. So there are lots of examples of negotiation. There's the police negotiators with a hostage and so on. You've seen this in movies. It's a very, very important negotiation practice. You see it in movies. Here's a clip from Casablanca, the movie, where Ilsa is buying some lace and she's in the souk, and the fellow tries to sell her the lace, and he keeps lowering the price in hopes that she'll buy the lace. Baseball, we're all, if you're in Boston, we're all waiting to see what, I guess yesterday they picked up a second baseman. So there's all sorts of negotiation. Are they going to trade somebody? Are they going to do this? So, there's all sorts of negotiation goes on in baseball, or any sports. And then, there's political. This movie, if you ever want to watch something really kind of nice, it's called The Bridge of Spies. And in the 1950s, a spy plane, a U-2 spy plane, was shot down over Russia. And Gary Francis Powers was the pilot, and he was taken as a prisoner. And the United States then asked a private lawyer here in the United States to negotiate a swap. And this is a Tom Hanks movie who does an excellent job at this. And it's based on a real story, but it is certainly entertaining and interesting to watch, especially after you listen to me for the next whatever. You'll see that, oh, a lot of this applies to what you saw. We know that negotiation makes better deals, whether that's sales or customer relationships or negotiating a contract with a plumber or whomever. It all improves business, but it also does this. And I think that sometimes people don't realize that negotiation is beyond the sales environment or the contracting office or joint ventures and partnerships. You use it every day. You could be negotiating with an employee. You could be part of a team, and on that team, you're really negotiating the best parts of how do you move forward. You could have employee disputes, and you may be the intermediary to negotiate something between the two parties. So I really feel I've always believed that negotiation is really an essential business skill. So just to make sure we have our terminology right, I'm going to take you through a quick anatomy of a negotiation. So here's a car that's for sale. And when the buyer comes to that purchase or that at least negotiation, he or she has two things in mind. One is called the aspiration price, which is what they would like to be able to buy the car for. And you can see here they'd love to buy the car for $15,000. The reservation price, on the other hand, is pretty much the top limit of what they're willing to spend. It's mental. It may be written down, but pretty much that's their feel of what they're willing to, what they'd like to be able to buy the car for, and what they will not pay over. On the other hand, the seller comes with the same 2 points. What would they like to be able to sell a car for? In this case, $22,000. And the reservation price, which is below that number, 18,000 in this case, they do something else with the car, and we'll come to that. But in negotiation parlance, this is called the zone of potential agreement. So it's the area that overlaps between the two. Now remember, everything here is in dotted lines, so there's nothing is spoken. Nobody goes in and says, "Here's my top line, here's my bottom line." It's all fluid. So the anatomy might go like this. How much are you asking for the car? This guy says, "Well, $22,000." He says, "Well, that's too much. How about 16.5?" And he says, "Well, no, it's got $500 in new tires." He says, "Okay, well, $17,000." And he said, "But it's only got 55,000 miles on it. Let's split the difference." So they come settle in, presumably at 19.5, take it or leave it, and the guy says, "Deal." All right. So now they've ended up with a transaction that has taken place. There's the price, 19.5. You can see where it kind of ended up, and I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. So just note that this is kind of what a negotiation looks like. Now, it used to be that negotiation was all about winning and beating your counterpart. And then in 1981, two Harvard professors, Urey and Fisher, wrote a book called Getting to Yes. And what this really means is the whole concept of win-win. And this is when it began to crystallize. And the whole principle behind the book is to stop competing and start collaborating. And that's what I will talk a lot about today is how do you collaborate in a way that you can both end up with what you want and be creative about it. Topic-wise, I'm going to be talking about value, which is a fundamental principle that you have to understand. I'll talk about leverage and strategy. Black swans are, in other words, the unknowns. I'll talk about the fact that all negotiators are human beings. Um, we've all dealt with the devil in a negotiation, and we'll talk about some of that. And then we'll talk about closing the deal itself. And then at the end, we'll summarize very quickly, but then we'll have some questions and answers. If you have something that you want to ask, please, Teresa will moderate that. Do you recognize this? This is a portrayal of the purchase of the island of Manhattan by the Dutch from the Canarsie Native Americans. And usually when people see this, they go, "Oh yeah, yeah, that was, the Dutch paid essentially $24 for the entire island of Manhattan." And people kind of chuckle a little bit and they say, "Well, boy, the Dutch really got the best deal out of this. Look at New York. They've got New York. What do the Native Americans have?" Well, you have to look at this in terms of value. Um, the Dutch really wanted Manhattan because it was a great port. The Native Americans didn't need an island. A matter of fact, the Canarsie Indians, Native Americans, the Canarsie is out near Brooklyn. It's way out near JFK Airport. So they just happened to be here negotiating the deal or hunting, and they ended up negotiating. They got something very special. They got metal, they got knives, they got guns, they got cloth. These are things that the Native Americans didn't have. So for them, they had all the land and the ocean and the sea. They had more than enough. So giving up the island of Manhattan was a no-brainer for them. So you could argue as to who got the better value. I guess you could argue that the Native Americans maybe got the better value. So let's talk about value itself. Value is relative, and that's what I talked about the Native Americans versus the Dutch. Uh, Value is relative worth, merit, or importance, and it's only relative to you. So there are three elements to value. One, it's individual and personal. If I just came back from Europe and I had a 100 euro note, and I said to you, how much will you give it to, how much money will you give me for this 100 euro note, which according to today is about worth about $118. Some of you might raise your hand and say, "Hey, I'll give you $70 for it because I'm going to Europe and I could use that. And if I can get it for 70 bucks, and boy, I'm really making a profit." Somebody else might say, "Well, I'm not going to give you anything for it because I have no plans to go to Europe. And what am I going to do with a 100 euro note?" So, what I'm trying to portray here is that it's individual. What you see in that 100 euro note is not what somebody else sees in that 100. It's a different value. It's variable. And let me explain this. Suppose you're walking through Boston on your way to a business meeting or an interview, and you're all dressed up. You look really great. You're walking past Macy's, and all of a sudden it starts to rain. Um, and you dart into Macy's and you say, "I got to get an umbrella." And you rush over to the umbrella stand and you look at it and you see this umbrella and it says $35 for an umbrella, and you kind of go, "Oh, I don't want to spend $35 for an umbrella, but I can't afford not to look good at this interview." So you grab the umbrella and you go over and you're about to purchase the umbrella and you look outside and the sun has come back out. And you take the umbrella, you put it back in your stand, you land and you go off, you leave and you go off on your appointment. It's variable. Value is variable. It was all of a sudden it was high value and all of a sudden it was no value. Finally, perception is reality. What one person perceives is one thing. What you perceive is not what somebody else perceives. Example. Here's a father standing in the middle of a road for some reason or other, and he's tossing his son up in the sky. It's kind of nice little game he's playing with his son. That's how he sees it. This is how the child sees it. The child sees it as, whoa, Dad, come on. Please don't throw me up this high. It's really high up here. And so the child perceives it differently. And the mother sees it a wholly different way. Even though it may only be a foot or two above the father, the mother perceives it as being he's tossing him 20 feet in the air and how he's going to catch him and what's going to happen. Each one of these, what the father perceives, what the child perceives, and what the mother perceives, their perception is their reality. So, tip number one, don't assume what you value is what others value. And remember that values can change in an instant. Let's talk about leverage. Second topic. Leverage is what you use to push or pull your counterpart closer to your position. Okay? And of course, your counterpart is doing the same thing. They have leverage, or they'd like to have a leverage, or they may have developed leverage to pull you to their position. And there's two types of leverage. One, there's positive leverage. So you can offer a discount um, if you're selling something, or you may customize something to make it more attractive. If you're on the buy side of the equation, you might say, "I'll pay you more." So that's a positive comment or positive leverage. Um, you can throw in a bonus. You can do a performance review. And that's an intangible, and I'll talk about that in a second. Or you can do some negative leverage, such as, if your rent is due and your landlord is increasing the rent by X number of dollars, well, you either pay up or you're out of here. So there can be negative leverage. There can be penalties on not paying your credit card debt, right? We all know that. Limited time is another way of having a negative impact. Let's talk about the performance review just for a moment, because there's leverage here. A few years ago, I had my dishwasher overflowed. The water all went under my hardwood floor. It destroyed my hardwood floor. I had to have it removed. So I got a contractor in to remove the hardwood floor before I put a new one in. And he gave me a price for, tearing up the hardwood floor and taking it away. And I kind of said to myself, yeah, that's kind of a high price. And I said, well, how can I get him to maybe come down on his price? So I offered him, I said, I'll tell you what. I said, look can you do something in terms of the price? Because um, I write a lot of reviews. I'd be more than glad to give you a perform. You do a great job. I'll give you a performance review. You can post on your internet, on your website. You can talk to people about it. You can have people call me. I'd be more than glad to do a performance review for you. Turns out he turned around and dropped $500 off the fee. So, for my willingness to do something that was intangible, he was willing to essentially give me $500. He needed something as an excuse for doing it, but I still ended up saving 500 bucks. Let me ask you a question. How do you feel in a job interview when it's the only opportunity you have? Kind of suck that in for a minute. How do you feel in a job interview or a meeting or where it's this or nothing? There's no opportunity. There's only one opportunity you have. Now, how do you feel in a job interview if you already have another job offer? It makes you feel a whole lot more confident. Makes you have comfort. Um, you just feel stronger, and that's the most important part of leverage. Your plan B is your best leverage. What are you going to do if you don't negotiate a deal? And in a negotiation world, they call it your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What will happen? What will you do if you can't negotiate a deal? If you can't get to the terms that you want? Because having a plan B is what is your best leverage to bring the other person closer to you. So if I were a landlord and I was saying, listen, I'm going to raise your rent and everything else, my plan B might be, well, if I'm negotiating with you and I don't have another client that wants the apartment, well, then you've got a little bit more advantage and leverage over me because I really want your business. But if I have somebody else knocking on my door who wants to rent the apartment, I can be very tough in the negotiation. So having a plan B is extremely important. But you have to understand that your BATNA and your plan B can come and it can go. If you're on that job interview, you're walking down the street in Boston and you're headed to the job interview and you've got this other offer, or at least you think you have another offer coming from another company. So you're going on to the second interview feeling really pretty good about yourself. You're going to go in there and you're going to knock them dead. You're going to, maybe you get more money, maybe you get a better position. You're going to feel really good. All of a sudden, your cell phone rings. It's the other company saying, hey, listen, we really wanted to hire you, but there's been a freeze put on all hiring in the company for the next 90 days or something like that. So all of a sudden, your plan B, the thing that was going to make you very excited, is now gone. So you have to understand your plan B, your BATNA, it can come and it can go. Or vice versa, you could be going off to that interview with knowing that you've only got one opportunity, and all of a sudden your cell phone rings and somebody else is offering you a job. That changes your whole perspective of how that meeting is going to go. So never stop building your BATNA. Always be thinking about what's my plan B? What's my plan B? What's my plan B? What can I do? Where else can I get things? Salesmen used to come to me and I know they say, well, I got a deal forming with so and so. And I said, that's really great. And they'd say, yeah, and they want to kind of go back into their office and just kind of relax on the fact that they've got something coming. Okay. But I tell them, I said, do yourself a favor, go get another deal. Go get another sale. Go get something else in the pipeline. Because when you finally get to the negotiation of that contract with that company, you're going to want to have a plan B. You're going to want to know that you can make your quota, regardless of whether you get this deal or you don't get the deal. So having a plan B, your BATNA, is extremely important. It just simply leverages better deals. So tip number two, never stop building your BATNA. Never stop planning and thinking about what are you going to do if I don't get this deal? And think about it. Maybe there's ways of doing it. Go get another sale, go get another project, go get something else. Figuring out another way of solving the problem that you might have or the need that you have. Um, then say, well, somebody might say, well, maybe um, I don't sell my car. Maybe I just fix it. That's a plan B. So let's talk strategy now. There's lots of parts about strategy, but I just want to talk about one key element of strategy. And people often ask, should you make the first offer in a negotiation? Think about for a second. I don't know what your answer is. If we were in a class here and I saw 30 people in front of me, probably 50% would say, yeah, you should make the first offer. And probably 50% would say, no, 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 let the other person make the more. Actually, more people would say make the first offer. Um, and that's really the right answer. This is called the great anchor debate. And let me explain why it's important for you to make the first offer. They are called cognitive, it creates cognitive bias. It creates a mindset that says, oh, this is a number. It gets a number in your head. And here's a couple examples I've picked out of books. One of them is, are there more or less than 2,000 jelly beans in this jar? Okay. And how many do you think there are? So that was group A. And there was one group of people. Then they said to group B, I'm sorry, it's getting cut off here a little bit, but are there more or less than 6,000 jelly beans in this jar? And how many do you think there are? So there were two anchors here, one of 2,000 and one of 6,000. This is the scatter diagram afterwards. You can see that by putting the 2,000 number out there, it created a cognitive bias so that most people began to estimate it was somewhere around 2,000. And when they put 6,000 there, it elevated it. So when you anchor, you are really setting a false, but maybe real position. Here's another one that I've seen before. Um, you're in college students are asked, Group A is asked, you volunteer 2 hours a week for 2 years. And all the students said, no, I'm not going to do that. But then they asked them, they said, would you volunteer on a 2 hour trip? Just volunteer for 2 hours. And they say, yeah, 50% of them said yes. So the anchor is, would you volunteer for 2 years, 2 hours a week? What if there were no anchor? What if you just asked the question to college students, would you volunteer for a 2 hour trip? And this is group B, okay? And group B in this case actually came back and only 17% said yes. So again, the anchor created a cognitive bias. Everyday anchors you see, retail store displays. You go into Macy's or a nice store and you see the sweaters out front and they're $285 for a sweater and you go, oh, that's really a nice sweater, but boy, 285, that seems like a lot, but I don't know, you know. Then you go to the back of the store and you see other sweater out back there for $150. You say, oh, well, that's a lot better. $150 is better than 285, even though if you hadn't seen the 285 number, you might be saying to yourself, 150, that's a lot. So a retail store can set an expectation of what the price should be. You see this in new car showrooms. You go into a new car showroom, what's the first thing you see? The sticker on the window, it sets the price. You see this in political negotiations, where somebody would say something so outrageous, but everybody would rush to that point and even come back a little bit from that point, the person might achieve what they really wanted in the first place, which is more than the neutral point where they were. Salary offers. Um, and I want to talk about that in a minute. How do you, let's suppose a salary, let's suppose you are going for a job and you get a salary offer of $50,000, say, and you were really hoping for like $80,000, but the anchor has been set. The guy or woman who was interviewing you said, yeah, this job pays $50,000. Um, but you want more like 70 or $80,000. You think that that's more reasonable, but it's a gut feel. But if you were to say to that person, listen, I understand that you're $50,000, but I was looking on last line last night at other comparable positions, and they were all in the 70 or $80,000 range. So could we take a look at the responsibilities and so on, so I can compare and see if it's valuable or not? If you want to counter an anchor, you have to do it with some research, some experience, a competitive offer, like rent. Well, I saw another apartment down the street that was, 10% less than what you're telling me this is going to be. So, if it's credible, you could have a point of negotiation that's in your favor. People often say, well, I want to let the other person say the first number because I don't know whether you're leaving money on the table. Because, gee, maybe they'd be willing to pay more for the car if I just let them put out a price. So there's kind of a fear there. Well, in reality, if you do your research and you do your homework, you should know where the price is going to come in. And so you can play around with that price. So on strategy, I really encourage you to go first and set the anchor. It's what really helps get the deal in your favor. Here are 9 dots. Many people have seen this little puzzle. Um, here are 9 dots. What we want you to do is to connect the 9 dots with 4 straight lines. Um, and people say, well, okay, and they work at it and they work at it, work at it. If we had the time, I would let you do it for 5 or 10 minutes, but we don't. So I'm going to show you the solution. A line gone here, a line up here. And some people have responded and say, wait a minute, you went outside the line, you went outside the box of dots. And you go down here and then you go over here. Oh, no, I didn't. Nobody said I couldn't go outside the box, did it? All you said was connect 4 straight lines without lifting your pen from paper. So here is the solution. And if you perceived a box, and many people do, that's why you have to sit back and say, wait a minute, what am I really seeing here? So we all live in a box. We live in a box because our DNA and our instincts tell us things. Our education tells us something else, our life experiences, and finally your business, if you're in a business. So that's the box that you're in. That's your core. That's what you know. So if you perceive that that is the limit of everything, then how do you think outside that box? In a negotiation, you can have a product or a service, okay? And you can have a price and you can have features and you can have requirements, such as, it can only be done on a certain day or has to have this or a certain operating system or something like that. So, so negotiation is a box. And the key here is, and this is what I want to really get to, is that before you can think outside the box, and this is really key to being creative in a negotiation, you have to realize that you may perceive it as a box. And you may say, well, I can't go outside that box. Well, if I go back to this, well, maybe there are other ways that I could put something together in terms of a deal um, that isn't in that box. And I'm going to give you some examples. This is what they call the black swans. These are the unknowns that could exist. And black swans go back to the 15th century, 16th century, when it was believed at that time that all swans were white. And so everybody perceived, you said swan, you said white. It corresponded. Until a Dutch explorer sailed around the west coast of Australia, and he saw flocks of black swans. And that's when you began to realize, oh, wait a minute. There are black swans. There are things that I don't know. In a police negotiation, the New York City Police Department's motto is talk to me. Talk to me because I need to know what you're thinking. I want to discover as much as possible around this particular hostage negotiation or whatever it might be. And this is a great little graphic here, is that when you approach somebody and you see them, all you're really looking at is their positions. But in reality, they could have a whole ton of interests that lie below the surface. And the key thing is you have to get to them. You have to figure them out. And that's where, as a good negotiator, you have to get in and discover the possibilities. So you want to seek what the other person's interests are, not their positions. They might say, my position is it's $500, but your interests are, tell me about your business, tell me about what's important, tell me, you seek the interests. You ask discovery questions such as, well, why is this and where is that and how do you do this? And you ask discovery questions. You engage and you begin to just dialogue and think. Some people say that you use your two ears and your two eyes and one mouth proportionally. In other words, don't talk a lot. Listen. And listening creates opportunities. Listening creates opportunities. Um, in my career, one of the businesses I started, yeah, it's a business, um, was I produced a series of conferences for small business owners in conjunction with chambers of commerce. And I put together a deal where a chamber of commerce would market these conferences to their members. And I negotiated with Disney and I got them to teach the programs. And I got them to teach it at Disney World. It was great. Um, when I went to negotiate the hotel, because I wanted to include 3 days at a hotel, I had to talk to the hotel group at Disney. So in my conversation with them, I said, well, listen, I had kind of set a figure of $2,000 for the conference and 3 nights in the hotel. And in that, I could give a little bit of money to the chamber. I would make some profit. Disney, I could pay Disney's training group, and I could pay the hotel. And $2,000 seemed to be about the right number. It was a great deal because of the fact that I'd say, look, send your members down here for $2,000. They can come down. We ran the program from 7 in the morning until noon to make it a valid program, and then at noon you can go off and do whatever you want to do. Bring your family, put them in the room with you, whatever you'd like to do. So it was a really good program, and Disney was teaching it, so that even made it better. But here's my problem. In talking to the hotel group, they said, well, our standard for the yacht club, which is where I wanted to do this, the cost at the yacht club is about $285 a night. Well, at $285 a night, 3 nights, all of a sudden I'm almost at $1,000. And, because that was going to be my cost, I sat there and I said, I can't do it. I said, all of a sudden my deal is beginning to dissipate and go away. And it was kind of like, I can't make it with those numbers. There was no margin for that. So, and I said, oh, that's not good. And the guy said to me, he said, well, you know, does it have to be on these dates? Because he wanted to do a deal. I said, what do you mean? Do you have to be on these dates? Because I had come to him and I said, I want to do it on these dates and so on. He said, well, because if you can do other dates, which are our down periods, I could strike a better deal with you. And I said, well, what dates do you have in mind? And he had a whole series of dates, which were their low occupancy times. And so I said, okay, I don't have a restriction in that regard. I think I can work with these dates. So I ended up, instead of 285 a night, I think I ended up with like $175 a night. And that made my margins a lot better. And I was able to go forward. But it was only from conversation and listening and discussing with him that I learned all about this. So great negotiators work at it. They pay attention to whatever the conversation is. They listen carefully and they listen completely. We're all guilty of this, but somebody else begins to say something and we jump in and want to finish the sentence or phrase with them. Don't. You have to listen completely. It's not easy to do because just a natural instinct, but listen completely. Listen to learn. Great negotiators are listening. Oh, sorry about this, folks. Don't know why that went on. Listen to learn. Avoid rebuttal listening. A lot of times you could be listening to somebody and all you're thinking about is what else am I going to say in response to what he or she is saying to me. That's listening. Don't do it. Avoid it. Listen completely and ask clarifying questions. You can simply ask the question, well, as I understand it, what you're really telling me is da 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 da. So ask clarifying questions. Um, Here's a little tip. The way I got to the Disney deal is that I ran into a guy. I guess I was interviewed. I suggested to meet with this guy who was an executive at the American Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives. There's an association for everything, and I wanted to have a lunch with him and really kind of figure out where what's going on in his life and what's going on in my life, business lives that are. And so I took him. This is the Four Seasons Hotel in Boston, the second floor lounge. And I took him to lunch here. And I probably spent, we spent 2 hours together. And in that 2 hours, I heard about an example. He was saying there was a business that was sending Chamber of Commerce or members of chambers to China. And there was a deal being made where they were sending thousands of people to China every year for business purposes. And it was a great deal. China wanted more interest in American businesses and manufacturing and so on. And American businesses wanted to outsource a lot of the work. So this turned out to be a great deal. And so when I heard this, I said, well, what can I do to leverage the marketing arm of the Chambers of Commerce? And what is it that the Chambers of Commerce really want? They want to be able to offer their members great services, great components to that they do. So I said, well, what training could I do? And that's when I ran into, I said, oh, I know Disney does this. And so I knew enough coming out of the professional development industry. I knew enough that I could get to the chambers of commerce and get them to market the program. And I could get Disney to teach the program because this was a segment of the market that Disney was not touching. They went after the big companies. They didn't go after the chambers of commerce and small businesses. So a 2 hour lunch, and I paid for the lunch. Um, and I came up with a great idea. So if you really want to listen and talk to somebody and discover things, and don't take them to McDonald's, don't take them to Tate, don't take them to an inexpensive. Take them someplace where you're comfortable. You're not gonna get interrupted. You're gonna be able to talk, and you're gonna spend a couple hours just discussing things. You never know what's going to come out of it. And by the way, if you really want to take control of the conversation, one of the things that I like to do is that if I really feel as though I'm going into a luncheon meeting and, at the end, they always bring the check and then they go, who's going to pay for the check? Well, when I first get to the restaurant or even before my colleague will join me, um, I then turn around and give my credit card to the hostess or the host and say, listen, when the bill is done, just bring it to me. Just you put my credit card on it, add the 20% so we're not into discussion. And when I do that, it's so much easier at the very end because I take the bill, I pay for it, it's done, no discussion. And it usually impresses the other person. So, tip number four, focus on interests, not positions. All negotiators are human. This is probably the most important point that I can make about a negotiation. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. It is Maya Angelou, the poet. So true. So very, very true. So you're going to be dealing with people, and you have to remember that your presentation to them and how you deal with them isn't so much about what you said or what you did. It's about the impact of what you said and what you did. It's how you made them feel. Did you make them feel important or did you make them feel like, you know, not a good thing? So you're dealing with people. Here's a picture of two guys talking, good body language, good conversation. You engage. If somebody else were just looking around and not paying attention, hey, it wouldn't make me feel very good, would it? So it begins with respect. Um, Pay attention. Be interested in what the other person is doing, and acknowledge that their opinion with empathy. Um, Engage as a professional. Going back to the pay attention and the notes, I found that, and I sold a lot in my businesses, being the owner of the businesses. I tended to, when I went on to important meetings, the only notes I would take would be if they gave me a name or a number or something very specific that I had to have. And I would listen and pay attention and talk and dialogue with that other person. And then I would leave the meeting. I'd go to Starbucks or whatever, and I would write everything down, everything that I remembered. And I'd usually put it in an email or a letter back to the prospect. And I say, my understanding is this, and I would go through all the points. And almost every time they would say, yes, Jack, that's really true. You captured our meeting perfectly. Pay attention. You'd be surprised how much you can recover and record afterwards. You don't have to write everything down. I find it if I were teaching a course or if I were in a meeting and everybody is just looking down at their notes and writing notes, I'm up here and you're down there looking at your notes and writing notes. Pay attention to me. I'm the one who's talking to you. It's a little insulting. That's the way I take it as a presenter. So pay attention. Um, Ways to build rapport. Hey, this is a good one. Always start with a compliment. Always tell somebody something nice about somebody. You go to a building and you're at a sales conference or hey, well, that's a great tie. I mean that's a little frivolous, but you might say, you've got some nice offices here. Looks like you guys do really well. Or your company has a good reputation, or your product has a good reputation. Start with a compliment. I mean, sincere, but start with find something positive to say. Uh, Try to always remember people's names. It's very, very, very powerful. Express empathy. If somebody is having a hard time, business is down, you can always just express empathy and say, "Yeah, I understand. It's not it. It's not good times." Um, Co-own problems. If I have to call Xfinity because my internet's down or I'm having a problem or something, instead of yelling at them and screaming at them, which I've done in the past, um, it's better and more productive to say to them, hey, listen, I'm having a problem. I'm not getting my internet speeds are down. I don't seem to be doing things. Can we work together here to figure out how we solve the problem? You'd be surprised when you co-own a problem, and don't push it on me or you push it on them. You co-own a problem, you team up. And here are the four most powerful words that I've ever used um, in probably, 60, 50 years of business. And that's, can you help me? Um, you'd be surprised how often, if you just simply say, can you help me understand? Can you help me understand? Can you help me do this? Can you help me? And people feel inclined to want to help, always help. Um, you can't do this today, but just as an example, um, when I had my businesses and I wanted to call in and get to the president of the company or to the president's office, and there's usually a way of being blocked. So I would take, and I know that the company had a number that was like 475 5000, and then all the um, everybody else's individual extensions would be off of that 5,000. So I just dial 753 5120, and somebody would answer, and a person would say something like, "Hey, this is Tom in engineering. How can I help you?" I said, "Tom, oh man, I don't know how I got to you, but I'm trying to get to the president's office. Can you transfer me there? I hope you can help me." And yeah, sure. And they would do it. So anyway, can you help me is a very powerful phrase. Trust is a must, of course, and words matter a lot. Think versus feel. If I ask you, what do you think about the weather? Okay, you'll give me one answer. If I say, how do you feel about the weather? You'll give me a different answer. So understand that words mean a lot. And in my first business, um, I came up with the idea that uh, I would aggregate all the training schedules of all the independent training providers out there, and I would sell seats, much like Ticketmaster or so on. I would sell seats in their programs. And so I would have to go out and negotiate deals with all of these training providers. And I would get people to come through me to go to all these programs. And I had a way of doing that. Um, but when my staff went out and began to sell to the training providers, I needed a 30% margin. So they would come in and they would say, "Hey, we'd like to sell your programs. You don't have to pay us anything up front, but when we do sell your program, we want a 30% commission." And after about a month or two in the business, um, we were having a real problem because nobody was signing up. Nobody wanted to pay a 30% commission. So at a staff meeting, one of the people in my on my staff said, "Well, why don't we stop asking for a 30% commission? Why don't we tell them that we want to buy their program at 70% of list?" And from that day forward, we never had another problem. Everybody bought into it because they understood two things. One, they were willing to give up 30% on their margin, but they were unwilling to pay a 30% commission because of the word commission. And the fact that they never had to write a check. We would collect the money, which was really in our favor. Okay. And when we collected the money, we would take our portion off the top and pass the remainder on to them. They'll never forget how you made them feel. That's tip number 5. Dealing with the devil. We've all been here. Um, people can be intimidating. People can be big. People can be loud. They can have authority. You can feel very awkward. So devils can be, an assertive personality, somebody who's the old-time negotiator, a win or lose. I'm going to win. They want to feel important and they're uncompromising. So how do you deal with this? Well, the first thing you need to do is build your confidence. Know your stuff. You have to know your stuff because when they begin to ask questions that are really rough and gruff, you want to be able to respond in a very intelligent, forceful, and professional manner. So know your stuff beforehand. Before you go to the meeting with somebody that you perceived is going to be difficult, anticipate the questions. Use your staff to give you the answers to questions that you perceive you're going to ask. And then practice. Practice your responses out loud. Um, I always found that you could be thinking about how you're going to say something to somebody, but thinking about it is not getting your mouth to do the same thing. So if you're going to practice out loud. Go find a closet, go find a room, go somewhere, and then say the words out loud because that's when you really own the words. And the other thing I found out is that if you're making an important phone call, and you know it's going to be a tough phone call, stand up. Make the phone call standing up. Don't sit down. You'll find that it's a lot more powerful when you stand up. How do you deal with the devil? First of all, you check your emotions at the door. Don't get excited. Don't get rattled. And remember that it's personal. It's not personal. It's business. The other person is really in business. And if there is something that's really irritating the other person, it may not be you. You have no idea what's going on in their life. They could have had a car accident on the way to work in the morning, and you may be the unintended recipient of that ire and the frustration that they have. And it may be coming across as though you're the problem, but you're not. And emphasize that you really, listen, I understand these can be difficult times and negotiations of this type are difficult, but all I'm trying to do is get to the best mutual outcome for both of us. So I hope you'll work with me to do that. Um, Keep focused on the problem. Keep focused on the problem. Don't get diverted off. You don't have to say no to things. If somebody says, "Well, I'll do this," and you say no, well, that's confrontational. So change it. Say, "I don't know about that. What if we did this? What if we took this approach?" So, and here's a really good one. Make your idea their idea. You could say something along the lines of, you said to me before something, and I think that may have some uh, good basis for an idea. So you're really taking your idea and giving them credit for it. Listen, they want to be heard, and you can always involve others if you have to. If conflicts arise, just apologize or take a break. Say, listen, I need to make a phone call. Let me call back to my office and see what they have to say. Just take a break. Avoid escalation. Stay calm. Express empathy. You know, and always allow them to save face. So tip number six, keep your focus on the problem. Okay, we're at closing the deal now. And for me, I always think about the fact that you need to always prep before you go into a negotiation. If you're going to negotiate for an hour or something like that, have a meeting or 1 hour meeting, you should be spending 4 hours in preparation. Um, Maybe it's 2 hours, maybe it's 6 hours, but spend time preparing for the meeting. Don't wing it. Hey, are you dealing with a decision maker? Um, so many times you get into a situation where you go through this whole thing, and really, in the end, you aren't dealing with a decision maker because they're going to say, oh, well, I have to take it to my boss and see what he says or she says. Um, Always have a strong BATNA, develop your plan B. Have you established a good rapport with the person that you can have a good conversation? Are you focused on the interests again? And have you really made a good faith effort? Now, on the negative side of things, here's what really ruins negotiations. And I think they're pretty obvious, but if you don't have a good rapport and they don't trust you, um, you show no empathy, your emotions get out of control, and you fail to listen, negotiation is not going to go well. You may never get to where you want to be. Um, don't burn bridges. Relationships really matter. And explore with what if. Well, what if we did this? What if we did that? Think outside the box. Um, Choose your words carefully. Choose your words carefully. The example of commission versus purchase. Think versus feel. Um, you elicit different responses. Uh, Keep an open mind to their ideas. You're not the only brain in the room. The other person could have some ideas that maybe you haven't thought about that are even better than what you thought of. This is kind of an interesting thing that I found out that research tells us that good news should be delivered in bites and bad news all at once. They did a study and they said that if people would rather find, walking down the street and find a $10 bill, and then the next day find another $10 bill, a total of $20, that would make them happier than if they just found a $20 bill. So, good news in bites, bad news, get it over with. Let them know the whole thing. Don't drag it out. Cover all the points in you are negotiating. This is a ploy. Um, if you're in a serious negotiation, like a partnership or something, um, somebody's going to come along and say, "Listen here, we have a number of points that we want to talk to you about." And they will then begin to say, well, the first item I have here is this item. Okay. So let's talk about that item. Well, no, don't talk about that item. Say, okay, great. All right. Take a note. What's your next item? What's your next item? What's your next item? Okay. Are those all your items? Yeah, those are all my items. Those are all my issues. Great. So now let's start negotiating. Otherwise, if you do it piecemeal, you'll have nothing left after the end of the negotiation because they will be taking away, taking away, taking away, taking away. Cover all the points in front, understand the whole picture, and then negotiate. Asking for agreement. A lot of people fear this. And you see people keep talking and they're talking and they don't really want to ask the question, do we have an agreement? Do we have an understanding? Are we in sync? Um, are we going to do, can we do business now? How do we want to do this? People have a fear of doing it because they're afraid they're going to get a no. Well, a no is not a bad thing. A no simply means, okay, we haven't covered something that we need to go back and talk about. And understand that your counterpart can't do anything else but say no. So if they say no, you turn around and say, okay, well, let me understand, help me understand what is it that's not working here? Okay, and how can we move forward and get past the no? Because I'd like to do business with you. I think, would like to do business with me. How do we do that? Okay, so I need to understand why you're saying no, and together, let's again team up. Together, let's figure out what would work for both of us. All we're trying to do is have the best deal, best mutual deal for us. So, tip number 7, um, All your counterpart can do is say no. Don't worry about it. It's a good thing. A no is not the end. No just means, okay, what do we need to go back over? So let's just do the summary. Number one, don't assume what you value is what others value. Really important. Really, really important. Never stop building your bat. No. What's your plan B? What are you going to do if you don't get that job? What are you going to do if you don't get that contract? What are you going to do? Go first and anchor. Set the price. Set the number. Create the cognitive bias. It's a strategy. Focus on interests and oppositions. You need to research, you need to dig, you need to find out, you need to understand what the issues are in that person. That's why he said, tell me about your business. Tell me about what you do. Tell me what the complicating factors are. How can I make things better? They'll never forget how you made them feel. Feelings are extremely important. Keep your focus on the problem if you're dealing with somebody who's difficult. And remember that your counterpart can all your counterpart can do is say no. So at that, those are my 7 best negotiating tips. Um, there's much more that could be done, but I think that gets 7 things. If you remember those things and you keep those in mind, I guarantee you, you're gonna have a much better life. Whether it's personal or business, anything, just keep all of that in mind. Thank you. And Teresa, do you want to
Yeah.
see if
Yeah,
there's any questions out there?
I don't have any questions that are submitted. Certainly we can give it a couple seconds if somebody does have a question that they'd like to type in. I am going to throw up our thank you slide here. It does have the request a mentor. If you would like to grab that. Yeah, I'm seeing thank yous in the chat, Jack. So you always do such a great and thorough job. So, um, but yeah, I'm not seeing any questions. Certainly, if anyone has any questions later, what is the difference between a negotiation and a compromise?
What's the difference between a negotiation and a compromise? Negotiation ends up in a compromise. Um, so when you negotiate, a compromise is the end solution. It's the part that says, okay, we are now mutually agreed. A compromise. If you don't if you're not satisfied, then it's not a compromise. So a negotiation would keep on going until a compromise is reached, a compromise that's acceptable to both parties.
Great answer. Thank you. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap everything up. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We hope to see you again soon. And thank you so much, Jack.
You're very
Fantastic job.
welcome.
And we'll talk soon. Thank you, everybody.
Take care, everyone.